So, Moy-SESS, how are you doing today?
Phil West. You
You
know what? Here's the thing. Ordinarily, that's a hilarious question to ask for reasons that I'll tell you about later. I'm doing. That's how I'm doing.
okay? All right,
I'm doing.
reasonable for Sunday morning. You noticed I pronounced your name a little bit differently than I have been pronouncing it. I pronounced it correctly there rather than incorrectly. That is the thing I have been doing. I am making it a goal in 2025 to pronounce everybody's name correctly because it is a good common courtesy. I don't mean to offend when I mispronounce, but certainly that is something that I'm definitely trying to be more conscientious of. For example, saying Bukhari rather than Bukhari.
I appreciate that, Phil. I really do. Making a conscious effort is so much better. I seriously had a bit in my stand up act when I actively did stand up that was about the exact same list of reasons people would give for mispronouncing my name, which was, well, that's too hard. This will be easier. Well, I'm just going to call you blank. And the thing that I've always said is, to me, making the effort is so much more important than actually getting it 1000% correct, because you would be shocked at how many people, Americans in particular, because I'm American, I grew up in the United States. That's most of what I've experienced, who just have no interest anything other than making it easier for themselves. So thank you, Phil.
Absolutely. Do you know who else is invested in getting names pronounced correctly?
Who?
The Austin FC communications staff. They have put together with their new roster page, their new shiny roster page, Cam Kubek is very proud of. They have pronunciations. They have all the players pronouncing their names. So you can tell directly from them how they are pronouncing it. So there should be no excuse. And to further help everybody, I've put together a supercut.
Brad Stuver,
Miguel Dessler,
Brendan Hines Ike,
Alexander Svatok,
Ilie Sanchez,
Jader O'Brien,
Dani Pereira,
Brandon Vasquez,
Osman Bukhari,
Leo Väisänen,
John Gallagher,
Julio Cascante,
CJ Fodre,
Diego Rubio,
Jean Kolmanich,
Bryant Jimmy Falcolin,
Stefan Cleveland, Micah Burton,
Owen Wolf.
Emergency podcast. Better did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. It is finally upon us. It's Sunday morning. It's a match week. We're going to have a game on Saturday. I have to find a babysitter for my 7-year-old because my wife is going to be in New Orleans doing Mardi Gras stuff, which sounds fun. That is the only thing I would rather be doing than going to Q2 Stadium and witnessing a game. It might be take your daughter to the press box kind of week. I doubt I'll be able to do that.
Cub reporter, man. Embrace it. Get her that junior press badge.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how are you, and how are you preparing for match week?
I'm still recovering from Thursday night, man. Party time. Excellent.
It was good.
Out at the parish. And then afterward at Shangri-La. And then afterward at a beef shawarma truck that was still open in the wee hours. I think I'm still awake from Thursday, actually. It was a vivid kickoff to things, and I hope I get some sleep in between now and match day 1.
I also partied hard, which translates to I had 2 drinks and went home by 8:15 and wrote up the news on Thursday night about the kit party and Andy Lockdane's comments and the little news that I got from Rodolfo Borrell about Uzuni coming Saturday. And indeed, he was on a plane. He is presumably at the Fairmont right now, taking in all the marathon madness. I had to go downtown briefly this morning. It was insane, as it is. I have not done any kind of marathon, half marathon stuff. I did the half marathon in 2012. It was good. It was fun. There's that hill up by House Park towards the end, which nearly killed me, but it was an accomplishment. And given the state of my Achilles tendons, I will never run again, let alone that far. Match week's
Yeah.
coming up, so
Yeah.
we gotta talk about some things. But any kind of last thoughts about Thursday before we?
As you said, you went home and were hammering away at that piece. I think you texted me at one point that you were almost done with it. And almost simultaneously, I look up from my phone and Rodolfo Borrell is taking another shot with various fans. True man of the people. Like this,
Nice.
to me, there were two stories out of that. The thing that you put in that article about Uzuni imminently arriving, and now we know that he has, in fact. Andy Loughnane saying that the club is committing to doing an event like that to kick off the season every year as a traditional thing that they see themselves as needing to do. I asked him about that because not every club in MLS does one of these. Not saying to the ACL Live scale of last year, but one of the scale of this thing of, hey, here's an open bar. Let's get the band out. Let's bring some players out. Let's show off the new jerseys. Let's have a good time and everybody get back in one place. That's an interesting flag to plant. And I detect some unclenching a bit from our club president. It feels like they are settling into this next phase of the club's life and they really have their hands around it. But the third big piece of news was all the fans just wanted to talk about how they did all these shots with Rodolfo Borrell, who was at training the next morning and definitely looked like he had done a variety of shots with fans the night before and then had gotten up early to get out to the training ground and do his job. I adore that man of the people thing of, yeah, sure, give me that shooter.
Speaking of the team president unclenching, we did get some clues that is in my article from Thursday about what the next two jerseys might look like. I've already made some guesses. They could be wrong, but they are informed by what Andy told us the range of possibilities might be.
They are good, educated hypotheses in the direction of what we could be looking at the next couple of them. I think the whole journey of this jersey, which maybe this is just, closing the footlocker on the radioactive watermelon, as I dubbed it. Some people called it the Sideways Blues Clues. Some people called it the electric watermelon, evoking the name of the electric jellyfish IPA.
The mowed lawn.
The mowed lawn. Less a fan of the mowed lawn because now that we've seen it live and in person and actual footage of players playing with it in the sunlight, it looks better than a mowed lawn. I mean, it looks pretty good. And even the swoops on the shorts that are a different color than the swoops on the sides of the shirt, I think they work. I think that as we have seen, at least with last year's jersey, initial doubt is turning into practical, okay, I get it. That kind of work. Okay, all right. I think they figured some things out in those first years. The OG was a gimme. It was, I mean, how do you go wrong with a standard vertical stripe jersey like that? The Sentimiento kit was a solid color kit, which, as solid colored kits go, it didn't look like dirty gym socks. The barcode kit happened. We'll just skip right over that. And it feels like they have found their groove of finding something new and vibey and fun each year.
Did I confirm that it looked good spending a few minutes at the Verde store, wedged in next to a mannequin at the window, kind of peeking over and being able to see 60% of the field? Maybe that was me. Maybe that's the thing I did.
Maybe.
I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one.
There
It wasn't a ton of people, but yeah, some people decided, hey, I'm going to go check this out. There was a preseason game that happened yesterday and 2-1 victory, Bucharest scoring both of the goals. The first one assisted by Vasquez, and then the second, just kind of a rebound type thing, came off afterwards, apparently, according to people watching the Pirates stream with a little bit of a hamstring thing. That's certainly something to ask Esteves about heading into Saturday. Hopefully he is good because, of course, Uzuni is still going to need to work himself into match fitness. But we did get some clues about that too. You were there on Friday. So let's talk a little bit about what Nico said heading into Saturday's match and then just some things that we got from that.
Well, let's talk about the new normal yet again, which we'll do a little bit less of as we get used to this being the new normal of we're talking to a coach in a midweek presser who is talking extensively about tactical decisions and some really great stuff in Spanish to our friend Alex at We Are Austin about Osman Bukhari and ways that he sees him being lethal and powerful and utilized in all the right ways with the kind of dynamic flexibility that we have long wanted to see from every player's deployment on the team. That's just one example. There were other things. Just in one midweek presser, we got so much more discussion of, look, this is what we're doing. And then whether you were watching peeking over the mannequins or watching via a pirate stream or watching however you were watching, that's a lot of what people were seeing in this Nashville match from yesterday. And
right,
like that open practice where we talked to him, we talked to Ilie, then we saw the open practice and we saw exactly the overall plan as it was being deployed. Maybe there is something to your tactics being strong enough that explaining your plan being, we're just going to go dynamically for what makes sense in the moment. And these are the 12 different things that each of these players are good at doing. Acting like that's a secret just feels like the crayons say what color they are, right? Maybe there is something to this, is letting the players play, letting them do what they are best at. This to me is a very positive pattern that has nothing to do with the vibes. And we've talked about the vibes and everything. But when it comes to just playing the play on the field, I am seeing and hearing consistency of what the plan is. It seems like everybody is locked in. Everybody is competing for their spot. Everybody is happy to be here and happy to be performing for the club.
Yeah, and it's not quite the Vanni Sartini exuberant level of confidence where it's like, yes, I will tell you my lineup before the game starts. But yeah, there is definitely confidence. There is a plan that he's setting forth that he's letting people know about. I am much more optimistic about the 10 approach than I was a few weeks ago, just based on what he's talking about in terms of using Pereira and Wolf, and in terms of fullbacks and how they're playing, and seeing a little bit of it. There's still some back passing, but it's what I call a horseshoe of friskiness versus a horseshoe of sadness. So it does look like they will set a little bit, but then they are looking to move the ball forward in a way that is more direct than, well, we're just going to shuttle it down the wings and we're going to put in a cross and then somebody's going to hit the Yeti cart behind the north end stands with an errant shot. I think those days are maybe behind us, and I'm all for that.
I think to that point right there, I think it has been really interesting seeing the way that he's been playing in second team players, not just because he will need them for depth flexibility. Look at where we were at a year ago. Second team players were absolutely necessary to be worked in because the roster was short. In this case, it feels like much more, you never know when Bukhari's going to go down with a hamstring injury for a couple weeks, and you need to know what you're going to do and not have to figure that out on the fly. Planning on the midweek fixtures, planning on things that you can't predict. Kip Keller was not the biggest problem of what resulted from that season opener against St. Louis. Yes, big problem, admittedly.
It was.
But how the team reacted to that, it, like, the defense just fell apart because one epically terrible thing happened to one defender. That was the most troubling thing about me, was seeing the systemic collapse around one big brain fart. That was what was most troubling. And what is most cheering to me about this approach that we've seen so far is they are making sure that they have all of the bases covered and they know who is going in if this person goes out and this person needs to come in their place and somebody else needs to move over, and maybe Gallagher goes over and is playing right back all of a sudden. They are preparing for all of that more in a just, we can put John or Owen wherever we need to.
And they still need some more depth. You saw that Riley Thomas and Patrick Unspellable last name are both second team signings. I thought maybe there was a chance that Thomas would be a first team supplemental signing and would switch back and forth. It doesn't seem like they're going to do that. I still am concerned about Jimmy Bryant kind of being a drop off from the other wingers, but I think they are more prepared for injury and needing depth heading into this season than they were last season. And the roster is a little bit more fixed thanks to all the work that Burrell did. So all of a sudden you have players who are not necessarily being relied on as starters or rotational starters, people that can be more in a backup role and still functional, like a Kolmanic.
Breaking news. I've got right here in my ear a little bug placed there by one Cam Kubek. Pronunciation on Patrick's last name, the new forward signed for the second team, it's Grichevsky. Some people were trying to go with calling him the Grizzler. Guess what? In no way is pronouncing his name something that involves the syllables required for such a nickname.
Right.
You're just going to have to get ready for Grichevsky. Call him the Chev Chelios of the second team. For you crank fans out there, exactly 5 Jason Statham fans who listen to the show. Yeah,
it's not quite as bad as when Dallas fans were trying to christen Hodder O'Brien as Darth Jader. That's not how you pronounce his name.
Oh boy. And then he came here and he became Obi. He became Obi. He went to the light side from the dark.
You can only imagine John Arnold's reaction to Darth Jader.
He was probably thrilled. What a consummate professional. He would just support whatever crazy stuff they come up with.
There was disappointed dad head shaking.
As there should be. And that's why
I think that's
why we admire Mr. Arnold, honestly. Among many other things is the disappointed dad head shakes. The league needs more of those, Phil.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for. Yeah. All right. So speaking of, I'm going to be doing a bunch of league previews this week. I don't know quite where I'm going to find the time, but I am going to. And yeah, so basically a lot of rosters have turned over incredibly. So we'll look at that. We'll look at the soccer wise under over points. We'll look at New Jersey's, all these kind of things, and just who key players are going to be heading into the season. Going to be fun, going to be exciting. So anything more about preseason?
As you put in the piece, Uzuni is here. Uzuni, I gather, from what I understand, it has started to get around that there's going to be a player welcome event on Wednesday. That isn't necessarily certain. It could also be Tuesday, I am hearing, and it could also be that is up in the air because the situation of his visa has to be fully settled for him to officially work, which includes doing a player welcome event where he's already been here for 4 days. So that is why sometimes this kind of stuff has to be a little bit performative. We all act like, okay, he just got here. He already knows the room service menu backward and forward. That's sometimes just the way that it is with international players. That's what I'm hearing.
Has he been to the Target yet? That's the
Has he been to the Target yet? Has he wandered over to the Whole Foods? Not that Whole Foods, the other Whole Foods, the big Whole Foods, the real Whole Foods.
Right. Even though the small Whole Foods is closer, the one next to the parish.
Much closer.
Yeah. So we're not saying lurk. We're not saying be weird. We're just saying that if you want a chance run in as Leo did with Ilie, that might be the place where that would happen.
Maybe.
Don't be creepy. Don't be creepy.
Don't be creepy. Don't make it weird yet. Make it the right kind of weird at the right time.
A selfie is fine.
But yeah, lots of things going on this week in supporters group land. Finishing touches on the opening day tifo are happening.
Nice.
It's huge. That's what I think I can safely say and not betray any confidences. It's huge and it's beautiful, and it's going to get a great reaction, and it does a couple of interesting things that they haven't done before. That's my hype man speech for the opening day tifo. Wonderful artist, wonderful composition, tremendous amount of work through bitter cold, humid cold, unseasonably not cold. Tremendous amount of work in a shockingly small amount of time when you look at the amount of human work hours that went into this thing.
Right. Is it the biggest?
It is not the biggest because the maxing out of the biggest overall canvas size was the season opener for 2023 by Fabian Ray, where it was a full rectangle covering the fullest area of surface area. So it is not the biggest, in the same way that Alaska is allegedly a bigger state than Texas, thanks to a lot of uninhabitable ice floats. But it is a culmination of a variety of different design aspects, but it is huge. It is friggin' huge. Some really impressive details that a lot of people are going to appreciate. Can we just talk about what this week leading up to match day 1 is like? This is the 5th year of these. You have been covering these and paying attention to these in a greater deal of depth than I have. What is this? Right. It's hell week for anybody working for the club. It's hell week for anybody in leadership of a supporters group. How have you seen the week leading up to match day 1 evolve and change, and how would you characterize it from your vaunted vantage point, Lord Phil?
I mean, I think a lot of it is just people are still trying to get a sense of the league and how things are shaking out and the offseason moves that are taking place. Most of them are done, but there are still some moving parts. There are still, like, for example, Josh Atencio just went from Seattle to Colorado, which doesn't seem like that's a huge sort of thing, but that could be something that could be really helpful to Colorado. That might indicate that Seattle, which has already had a ridiculously amazing offseason, might have even more of that. If they're letting somebody like Atencio go, they might have somebody waiting in the wings who's going to make that team even more complete. So I think a lot of it from the league perspective is just figuring that out. I do not commit to trying to do positional rankings, trying to figure out like where teams are going to place, just because that is a fool's errand. You get that wrong every year when you try that. So there's no point in really doing that. But I do have a sense of which teams are going to be good, which teams are going to be bad, kind of projecting, okay, who are the playoff teams going to be, who's going to be in contention for the wooden spoon. I mean, a lot of that is figured out, again, barring whatever happens in the summer. That's the one caveat too, right? So in the summer, anything can change there. But I think just in terms of covering Austin FC, it's trying to figure out who that opening day lineup is going to be. It's about, do they get off to a strong start or not? Again, 2022, it was a 37-degree freezing rain sort of night against Cincinnati. They got a 5-0 win, which was unexpected, and that really set the team off in a trajectory. The other 3 seasons, they had losses to start the season. That is, again, you notice they missed the playoffs all of those years. So I do think the opener is really important in terms of tone setting. So I think just trying to figure out how that win will happen. We'll get into SKC in a second. I did a preview of them for American Soccer Analysis, and there are definitely some things to look for with them, both how they have remade themselves on the offensive side. They let go of a lot of older players, and then where they're still kind of having problems, that's goalkeeper. Their goalkeepers are really bad. So we'll talk about that in a second. But just from your perspective, just being new into this and being able to attend those midweek press conferences as I do my day job stuff, what kind of things are you noticing? Again, you talk about this new openness with Nico compared to this kind of shuck and jive that Josh Wolf would do with media.
Yeah.
Maybe, again, there would be some kind of smoke screens that he would throw. The media would be his useful ally, and, oh, we're going to do things this one way, and then we actually do things. Do you feel like it's kind of more straight shooting from Nico?
Yeah,
we're going to do this, and
that's very much the feeling that I got, and not so much as a defense of Josh, but one of the big aspects to, I think, the previous era personality is, even though he has been gone for a while, Claudio Reyna's influence on that being the default of the way that the club was built from the beginning is something that can't be overstated. That is something that, even once he was gone, this was Josh's first head coaching job, and that's the standard that was set out there. Is there are certain things we're not going to talk about, and there are certain things that we're going to talk about them this way. And I feel like so much of the character and bearing of the club comes from that. And until they fully shook off the last vestige of that, which was Josh himself, I don't feel like the club had the ability to find its true character, find a way to grow out in ways that they can tell him to be a certain way all they want, or encourage him to be different all they want. But if he doesn't want to be different, well, he's not going to be different. And I think the overall reset, the biggest benefit overall, is that people are seeing opportunities to give the club character, give answers that actually have something behind them, while also, dodging things that naturally people are going to dodge. It is not their job to give away literally everything, including the finest details of the tactical plans and exactly how they plan to dismantle this team or that team in advance of actually playing this team or that team. I like that embracing mystery is not something that is wholesale. Guess what? The curtain's down, the gate's closed. Nope. Guess what? We're going to play soccer next Saturday. Okay, but how? Very soccerly. We're going to play soccer very soccerly. Okay. And we're going to score goals. You're going to score goals. You don't say. Is that what wins games? News to me.
Yeah. To your point about Claudio, part of the issue obviously was, again, we thought, oh, Claudio, great team building from NYCFC coming here. I think a lot of that had to do with City Football Group. You have a pretty impressive pool of players to choose from. Obviously, building that during a pandemic, getting 2 players from the same Paraguayan club might have not been a good idea necessarily. I don't know. There were some weird things with the build, and then trying to repair out of that with just where they were locked in on contracts and things like that. I think there were some limitations. For example, the Zardes signing happened in that kind of transition point,
that liminal period.
When Reyna left and you had Josh Wolf being chief soccer officer and Rubio helping. I think 2018 or 2019 Zardes would have worked on the team, but Zardes at the stage that they got him in just didn't work for what they were trying to do. There were just, I think now, in terms of here is the game plan, here is the way that we want to play, and then here are the players we have to match that. I think that's much more aligned. I don't think that that was ever really congruent the entire 4 years. I mean, 22, they caught lightning in a bottle. Some good things happened. Players performed in these kind of career year type performances, and that all kind of converged and came together, and that was great. But you even saw that kind of running out of steam about 2/3 of the way through the season. So once they got figured out, there were definitely some tactical things that happened. I mean, you have to credit Wolf for that. You have to credit him for getting the team into that position and surprising everybody. But I don't think there were any real surprises by the time that the regular season had ended. And then a little bit more kind of lightning in a bottle during the playoffs. That match against LAFC really showed the team's limitations, and that carried on over into the next 2 seasons. There was just a big hangover, I think, from that Western Conference Finals. So I'm not saying that Austin's going to all of a sudden race to the Supporters Shield, but I do think that, again, if the chemistry can happen, if that front line, that UVB line can really coalesce and create sunburn upon all the opposing defenses, then I think things are going to be pretty rosy. I would say, again, kind of in that 4th through 6th range is my early prediction, even though I said I wasn't going to do a prediction. I think it's, again, a lot of it is also going to depend on, it seems like there's going to be one more player that comes in the summer. And I guess it's going to be a matter of, what does the team really need? Is it going to be a depth piece? Is it going to be somebody who's a more pure creator? At this point, hard to say what they can do, what they can engineer, but it seems like, again, the indications that Roto gave is that he's got somebody in mind, that someone's coming in the summer. Of course, these are just, kind of hints at a Thursday night party.
Hints.
Okay.
He flat out told, I mean, look, if Roto, what have we been told, Phil? If Roto says it, we can print it. He told friend of the show, Logan, who has a cut with patches on it, has a section of the cut with national flags on it. And he's, oh yeah, I've got, a flag for all the different players on the team. And Roto said, oh, you're missing one. Probably in the summer. What? I mean, it just dropped the mic, walks away.
Right. So from which country? I mean,
from which country? One that isn't currently represented on the squad.
Right.
What country that could be? Who knows?
Right. Yeah, that's a big question.
So here's the thing. He hasn't lied to us yet.
No.
If he's that certain that it's happening, then we can probably expect somebody in the summer window.
If it wasn't sure, he would be evasive. Like we knew that from Bukhari.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the week before Bukhari signed, he would not talk about that player. He would not acknowledge that player existed. And then all of a sudden, no, you signed him. Look at that. All the rumors were true.
And I like, on this note of signing players and the deals being made and everything, some of the criticisms that have been there for a little while from the fan base are, oh, ownership just doesn't want to spend. That's why we got this guy who's over the hill and we got that guy over the hill. Maybe it was more that ownership was not willing to spend based on who was asking them to do the spends and for what. Like, what deals was Claudio bringing to the table that didn't go through it? Look at what he did get across the table. And what was there that cost more money and would have been better than what he did end up bringing through? And regardless of when ownership figured out that there was an issue there, that is something that it takes time to figure your way out of. And in the way that Roto has waited for the right time for the right players in the right transfer windows since he's joined the club, ownership also this is entirely speculative, but I think it's been borne out in the way that we see these kinds of changeovers in sporting operations happen at other clubs. You've got to wait for your guy to be available. And it turns out it took winning a treble for their guy to become available. And once he was, here he is. And And going back to when he says something and, tells you to bank on it, this is one of the reasons that I am bullish on something he said early on about how, no, he is truly here to build something, not just be here and do this job and jump somewhere else. He is looking at truly properly rooting this club in being a top tier, major, big club that has an international reputation, not just based on their hedge fund style market value, not just based on that, but because of what is actually happening on the field. That is so much more important to him than the brand sponsorship deals and that kind of thing. He gets that is all part of it, of course, but this is somebody who is very focused on going, here's what I can do, almost completely redoing it all from scratch and retaining the parts that are worth it and completely rebuilding everything else. This will be the season that we begin to see that, if we see that.
It's funny that you had mentioned Hedge, because I was thinking about Matt Hedges, who got signed right as Burrell was coming on board. And again, Hedges was essentially like very expensive kind of center back insurance because they needed that at that point. They didn't really have a fix in mind. Definitely a good player, but a lot of money locked in for kind of what he actually brought and what he got, which again, and it was curious, like Sean Rubio helped engineer that deal with Toronto. And then by the end of 2023, he had taken a job with Toronto. Kind of weird. I don't know.
Triage,
but
triage.
Yeah.
And sometimes
so
you're doing the triage to get yourself the next job.
Right. Maybe. Yeah. So whose triage is it really? He was important to bring in at that time, but you're already locking yourself into a salary level that is much more for a rotational starter center back than Burrell is clearly willing to pay. If you look at, for example, the Svatok deal versus the Hedges deal, basically you can get two Svatoks and still have change for what you paid Hedges. We have, I think, an overall smarter roster build happening with Burrell, but again, you can't remake a roster in one window. Again, that's why Austin had to run pretty thin starting the 24 season to make way for the summer. Not the case heading into 25. It's a pretty complete roster. Still some parts to change over, but even the quote unquote bad contracts are not necessarily bad players, right? So they're definitely players who can function within the system, who can be at least rotational starters, who do bring some things, right? So unlike what we've seen in years past, it wasn't quite Manny Perez at striker, but there were certainly some question marks in terms of some of the starting lineups that we've seen throughout the first 4 years. And hopefully we're not going to have those kind of question marks anymore. So let's talk real quick about SKC. So like I said, American Soccer Analysis, I did a deep dive on them, and we're going to link out to that. If you look at Verde All Day, where we put up the announcement about Emergency Podcast 34 coming out, I'm going to link to this article as well. And there's some other previews that are wedged in there as well, but this is the first one on the pile. That's the way that American Soccer Analysis does it. They group a few of them together. So a couple different things that I pointed out. So they got rid of a bunch of players. They had 8 players that were over the age of 29, and they got rid of 3 of those. And then another player who was right on the line. So they did quite a bit of roster overhaul. And of course, Johnny Russell, Tim Melia, Alan Polito, the most notable of the players that they swapped out. And then they got Dejan Joveljic in the first ever cash for trade that MLS did, that they allowed here in the offseason. And Kansas City and LA barely beat out Houston and Philadelphia with the Jack McGlynn deal, which we learned about at that conference in Houston. And it's sort of a situation of, well, we have Dejan Joveljic at home, which is Willie Agata. They're both very similar strikers. I don't know that there's quite a system where they'll ever get both of them out on the field, because that is not generally Peter Vermes' way. In the 15 and a half years that he's been coaching, he's been mostly a 4-3-3 kind of guy. And they have Mason Toy as well, who is kind of a great value brand Willie Agata in kind of his own right. Like, they have some really good forwards. And they picked up a true number 10, Manu Garcia, in the offseason as well, right after the Joveljic deal. And they got a winger from Russia from that same team. It was a team called Aris, I believe, a Greek team. So they have remade their offense, but there's some horrifying numbers with the goalkeeping. John Pulskamp, who's going to take over now that Melia is gone. These are really amazing statistics. So he is 99th percentile in terms of the shots that he faces in terms of difficulties. He's facing difficult shots, which could be part of fault of the defense, but His post-shot XG, goals against, and his save percentage are both in the first percentile in both categories among next 14 competition goalkeepers. That's bad. That's the absolute worst you can be. And then he lets in 2.17 goals against per 90. That is the third percentile, which is pretty much about as bad. I feel like a lot of goals are going to get scored in this game, particularly from Austin. Any thoughts about SKC and what they bring and what you're expecting now that you've heard all of that?
They're playing Inter Miami on Tuesday, right? Isn't that when they're doing their CONCACAF Champions Cup game? You can look that up as I'm rambling, but I seem to recall that they have that before the actual first game of the season. And the other thing, my head, and it's going to be friggin' cold, right? Because that's in Kansas City.
Okay. Yes.
So this is another wrinkle of this. I feel like it's going to be a real good team for Austin to play their home opener against, with a newly recharged midfield and front line and a further fortified back line. You did everything in depth. You wrote out the piece, and my brain swam through all of it. And I recommend everyone swim through it, because that's really, looking through it, to me, said everything that I needed to know about what I think the guys on the field are doing. The fun guy in me, who loves bringing up Peter Vermees every opportunity I can. Peter, the unkillable cockroach Vermees. No offense to Mr. Vermees, who I actually, I respect a great deal. But yeah, bring a nuclear blast anywhere near that guy and he's fine. My question is, what Peter Vermees we get is this his 15th or 16th season?
He started in the middle of 2009 as an interim, so I think I guess his 16th full season.
So 16th full season plus a half.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see, is it going to be a sweet 16th, or is it going to be unmitigated chaos that finally sees the unkillable Peter Vermees toppled from his perch? I'll use a wrestling analogy. It is like, The Undertaker never loses at WrestleMania until he does, to the absolute worst opponent one could think for it to be. Same kind of thing could happen with Peter Vermees this year. In story terms, it seems like they might be loaded up and they're in the Champions Cup and they're doing this and they've been pretty good and this and that wasn't really his fault. Well, maybe the chickens are finally going to come home to roost, and we could see the toppling of the king.
Okay. You want to hear something hilarious?
Hit it.
Okay. So I just looked up the weather for Kansas City on Tuesday. The high is 6, not Celsius. This is a daytime high of 6 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
The nighttime low will be -4.
Okay. Like that LAFC RSL game in the snow at the beginning of last season.
Well, this is more like the Minnesota US World Cup qualifier where Matt Turner got frostbite. Can they play this game?
Can they play the game?
Can they actually play this game? That would be my concern at this point right now. That seems brutal. That seems that seems dangerous.
Messi's camp absolutely must be trying to move it with every last ounce of their juice.
Why don't we just host this? Messi.
Why not? Why not tear up the pitch on a Tuesday night? Who cares?
Right. I imagine that it is warmer in Miami. I don't know that they could do that at this late stage, but
Probably.
if they're playing in those conditions like 5 days before, that just would exacerbate things. It's going to be in the 70s in Miami. So they probably should play that there. They probably just should swap those out, but
that's
who knows?
Literally 2 days from now. But to me, even if the match is not played, if it's delayed, that those players had to warm up and get ready and try to play the game, that is similarly another chip in the stack for Austin, with an SKC that had to get themselves amped up to play a midweek game in a Champions Cup competition and then not have to play it. There is something about the momentum that you get into when you get into the days leading up to game mode, and then you suddenly have nowhere to put all of that. And it just sits there.
Uzuni still will not be playing in this game. We don't think we heard there might be a chance for him getting maybe 15-minute run out, just kind of depending on what happens this week. Nico gave us that indication on Friday. We don't know Bukari's status, but We do know kind of the 11 that Austin can field. We see Pulscamp's numbers. We see this kind of uncertainty about Champions Cup and what's going to happen there. So I feel good about an Austin victory for this one. I feel like it is going to be a first home opener victory since 2022, which again, like I talked about before, hopefully that sets a good tone for the season. By the time that we have that matinee game against San Diego on March 23rd, which is going to be the 5th game of the season, I think everybody's going to be there and up and running, and we're going to be able to see a fully functioning Austin FC. But it is going to take a few weeks. But again, this is the case for a lot of teams. There is this kind of slow ramp up to we have a full roster that's functional across MLS just because of the way that the windows work and all of that. If they are switching to that kind of fall spring calendar, like we talked about them doing, like they've been talking about doing, I think that might change a little bit in terms of how transfers work. But this is the world we're in right now, where you're getting players a couple weeks before the season actually starts, and teams are changing a lot of what they're doing on the fly just because new personnel is necessitating that.
To throw out my own number prediction that I said that I wasn't going to do, kind of like you said you were going to do. We've talked about third. I think third is achievable.
Yeah, me too.
Especially with the chaos of all of the transfers and trades and moves and changes around the West. There's a lot of volatility in the West, and you know, we were toward the end of the season, we were looking at the West going, West, what are you doing? Where it was like everybody was in chaos. Everybody's in chaos again, but different flavors of it.
Right.
What I would love to see more than anything, using Buka's possible hamstring injury as an example, is people watching Austin FC not going, oh no, star player is injured. Well, right off half of the season. It's over, guys. We gave it our all, but one injury and we're screwed. I feel like what I've seen from this preseason, the opposite of the lie of this preseason, has been really deeply investing in giving guys those minutes so that when, as they know at some point they will be called on, they're able to make the best strategical decision in the moment in terms of who to go with, who is going to come in clutch, who is going to, Nico put it as, como se dice, step up. Who is ready to step up? That is what they have been doing the preseason work to shake out, is who is ready to step up, and they're going to work in the guys who just freshly got here and go to war.
Yeah. I'll predict a score. I'll throw this out here. I think it's going to be 3-1 Austin is what I'm projecting. I think, again,
I think
new offensive
that's
firepower
safe.
with SKC. I think they get a goal, but I think given where the goalkeeping is for SKC, that is going to be really to Austin's advantage.
I feel like 3 Austin goals is a reasonable expectation, and I almost want to say that there will be a brace in there somewhere. They have been cohering really well and playing to one another's strengths really well, and being unselfish in the important ways and being selfish in the important ways in the balance of the little bits of things that we have seen. There is no longer that heliocentricity, and I think that is something that benefits the majority of the squad.
In the spirit of Moon Towers over under, where one of my favorite questions in there is the over under on the number of the first goal scorer of the season. Who do you think the first goal scorer is going to be?
I have to make this conditional.
Okay.
If Bukari is injured, obviously not Bukari.
Right.
If Bukari's injured, Brandon Vasquez.
Yeah, I think Vasquez regardless.
I think if Bukari is not injured, I think Vasquez.
yeah.
Okay, you played directly into my joke.
Yeah.
However those betting lines work that I don't endorse. Yeah.
I think they're going to put up that soon. I'm going to play that. I beat both the Moon Tower guys last year in over unders. So it's a fun exercise in just projecting how you think the season will go. A lot of good questions in that. We are not offering something similar, but we are offering a whole boatload of season previews, which I've now committed myself to. Committed myself to this earlier, actually, but that's fine. It'll be a lot of fun to get those done. And again, we'll give everybody just a better, fuller sense of how the season's going to go. I know there's tons of season preview content that's floating around out there. Definitely worth taking all of that in and checking it out to acclimate to what's happening with the season. Got season pass rolling. Everything is ramping up. I love this time of year. I love going back to the office, as it were, and very excited for Saturday and what that might all bring. Anything else you got before we take off?
Not really, man. Just keep it tuned here and hydrate and be safe. Stay warm. Allegedly, the weather is looking to be rather chilly for match day 1, so bring.
Not as chilly as Kansas City on Tuesday, but they are passing out beanies at the opener, and
There you go.
You
Be
may
one
end
of
up
the first
wearing it
10,000.
rather than stashing it in your bag. All right, we'll take off. We will return maybe next Sunday, talking about how that SKC game went and looking into what will be the first road match against the Timbers, who have a really excellent new home jersey and is a team that is a little bit in transition as well, as many of them are. Evander, who you might remember from Portland fame, has moved on to Cincinnati, so a much different looking team already with that one key player out. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week. Enjoy everything. I will probably see you at Q2, given who listens to this, and really looking forward to that. Maybe see you at Hop Squad before. Obviously, brace yourselves for a big tifo, and we will see you next week.
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.